Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast. So we're ticking all the boxes and bringing a much needed minority perspective to popular discourse, popular internet discourse. Today we're talking about injury reserves live from the dentist office. I was a bit reticent about putting another American hip hop album on the roster. However, Stepa J Groggs died recently, and this was a group that meant a lot to me. And while I was kind of grieving his death, which is so weird, like parasocial grief is very strange and
Mm,
odd. The only way I could think of to duly commemorate him was just to listen to his music and just enjoy it. So I thought, well, I'd love to share that with like one of my favorite people, Matty, and like see what she thinks of the
hi.
album and just talk about it. And yeah, I don't want this to be like a super sad episode. I want it to be fun. Um, I think that's what Groggs would have wanted.
Yeah, genuinely.
But yeah, so that's why we're doing another kind of hip hop album. But we'll be going back to other stuff after this. So we've already done Injury Reserve before. But if you want to like reiterate, I guess what is now your history? Because I guess it's been like almost a year since I last. Well, yeah, a year since the last time we talked about these dudes. Like, what's your history? Has any developments in the last year in Injury Reserve for you?
I had actually heard the first 3 tracks of this album before I listened to it for this podcast. I had, I believe, gone to listen to it at some point. Oh, I remember why. It was because I started listening to it. This is really boring story. You can edit this out. I started listening to the album, and then my headphones broke, and then I had to go home. And I genuinely loved the first 3 songs. But just forgot that I was listening to this album and moved on with my life.
Yeah,
It is a very uneventful history since we reviewed that
it's
album.
very much
But what I will say,
lost in the rain.
yeah, it really
Yeah.
was. It's really sad.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that I really loved that episode we did. I really like. I went back and listened to it. And just yeah, it was just a good time. And I'm really happy we talked about them in their prime. And it, I think what's saddest
Yeah.
for me is that I feel like I think you and me now me as well both see their mixtapes as pretty much full-fledged albums, but I think psychologically for them, Injury Reserve, the self-titled album, was so important because I think that was them saying, okay, we're ready, we're here. There's so much about like their come up in their music. They're always talking about it. And I feel like that was them saying, we're done with our come up. This is us.
Yeah, and what was so, I guess we can talk a little bit as a sort of preamble about just how surreal and weird parasocial grief is, because like one thing that was so heartbreaking about Groggs dying is I genuinely felt the best of Injury Reserve was yet to come. Like I felt like their best album was yet to come, and I feel like while Life from the Dentist Office is, in my opinion, the strongest like full run of tracks, where there's just, in my opinion, there's just no bad tracks on this mixtape, in my humble opinion. The first half of Injuries Are self-titled is their strongest like thing they've done.
Yeah,
and it was such like I could see them making a whole album of that quality at some point, and it would be like one of the best albums of the decade. And it was so sad that is just never going to happen. But there was also sort of guilt that like, is it selfish to feel sad that someone died, and I'm sad that I won't get the life-changing music? But in a way, how can I access any other sort of grief? Like, it would be disingenuous for me to say I'm as sad about his death as his kids are, for example. So like, just you feel the sadness and you have no idea how to articulate it in a way that isn't selfish or horrible because you don't actually know this person. Parasocial grief is so strange.
Yeah, I kind of, the last time I remember experiencing parasocial grief was David Bowie. I can't remember the last time a musician died this suddenly. because it was awful. I just went on to like, because yeah, I feel disingenuous saying it this way, but it was a horrible moment seeing someone that I admired and respected had passed away. And yeah, so I just logged onto Instagram and saw a post, and yeah, I couldn't believe it was him. But anyway, on David Bowie's death, it's obviously such a different thing because the world erupted into praise and like remembrance. But what I think you have there is a kind of perfect example of like mass parasocial like grief.
Yeah, which is such a different thing.
Yeah, no, it exactly
If if I just meet someone on the street who says, "Oh, I'm so sad Bo died," it feels a bit more performative than someone who's like, "I'm sad Groggs died," because it feels like no one gave a shit when Groggs died. At least for me, like no one talked about it, and it was such a shattering event. But like,
it sucked.
After a week, I just saw nothing about it. Whereas Bowie, it was years of commemoration and like tribute performances, and I mean, he deserved all of that. He was a great. I loved his music, but it is weirdly depressing when a smaller artist dies before their prime because you're all alone in that kind of sadness.
Yeah, it's sad that someone as talented as Groggs doesn't get something like that, but it's also nice in a way that I like can take a look at those comments that just say like really earnestly, I'm really sorry to hear this. I hope you're okay. And hope and sort of feel on some level that it is genuine. Like I think I know it's typed text on a phone screen, but I think you can tell. I think there's like a subduedness to, a grieving message that can make it genuine. And I just
another kind of angle to come at this from is like Mac Miller's death was really like it wasn't it didn't massively disrupt my life, but it was really heartbreaking for me, and that was such a different feeling to this. Where with Mac Miller, before he died, I still really liked him. I loved his like mid-career, early career stuff. But I felt like he was past his prime, and I was like, I'm probably not going to be listening to a lot of Mac Miller albums now because I'm not super into this new kind of soft R&B kind of moment he was in. And then when he died, it was this weird thing of like, well, I'm not losing much artistically, because I wasn't really, I'm not as into his late career stuff. But so the tragedy was more personal and emotional, of just like it's really fucked up that all of his music was about his depression and addiction, and that story will never change. Same with people like Elliott Smith. I mean, obviously he died in the early 2000s, but kind of artists who like Ian Curtis, the fact that their narrative is just frozen in amber, and there will never be a time where like, oh yeah, they did loads of drugs at that point and were really depressed, but they made it, and now we can, when it's just like
they're not Danny Brown.
Not Danny Brown. It's like, and I thought that with Groggs. I don't know how he died, but it's really sad that until right to the end of his career, he was always rapping about his depression and alcoholism, and that story will never change. And there's nothing like a light at the end of the tunnel when you listen to like a Joy Division song. It turns out okay in the end. It's like, no, he kills me. I don't know how Groggs died, but it's just super heartbreaking.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say, I think, is just what really resonated with me about what you said is being authentic with your grief. And I think it's respectful to Groggs' memory and to anyone's memory to acknowledge the ways in which their loss will affect you. I think that's true of all parasocial relationships, because I think we're just in an age where we have to accept that that's going to be a thing. Just has to be an acknowledgement of the ways in which you appreciate that person that ensures that your perception of them and your enjoyment of them and your support of them like remains respectful, and I think is generally applicable to how we treat parasocial relationships in general, is just celebrating the aspects for which that person brings you joy.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to end it off. I guess we can now move on to the album. All right, let's get into the album itself. So Injuries of Life from the Dentist Office. This came out in 2015. I listened to it the year it came out, so I was 15.
Oh,
And I specifically remember like it was a summer when I was at my dad's house, and you visit. I'm a child of divorce, so you visit your dad every summer or so, and there's like it's always for me at least it was always a bit miserable and boring, and like I was a bit awkward around my dad because there's all these like weird feelings of animosity and confusion. um, and this was one of the that was like that was like for me that was the best year of music in my life, where like so much amazing stuff came out, so many acts came onto the scene that meant so much to me, and Injuries was one of them. So I do remember sitting in that like little bedroom, like looking out the window, in like what was it, Bradford suburbs with nothing to do, listening to Injuries and falling in love with them, and yeah, I think it's very interesting, kind of coming at this with probably more of an eye on what Groggs is doing, because his death is so
yeah.
recent. We're so hyper aware of him on the album, and like I remember back then, Richie was definitely like the charismatic front man. Like he did most of the hooks. He is to Injury Reserve what Q-Tip is to Tribe Called Quest. You know, like he's gonna Andre 3000 to Outkast. Like he's gonna give the eccentric pop sensibility, and Groggs is always like the glow, like a slightly socially awkward, gruff voice. This dynamic also reminds me of Big Boy from Outkast, and how he's a lot more down to earth and like the normal one, I guess. While Richie's always out there just singing, doing crazy shit. And in this album especially, Richie's raps are way more goofy and esoteric, and Groggs will come in with something quite grounded and depressing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that dynamic. I adore that dynamic. And even Parker Corey, the producer, this is one of the few groups where the beat maker, his presence is so prominent.
Essential.
I really feel Parker Corey in every song they make, and he's got this really playful style of production. It's very goofy as well, and like he's always like distort Richie's voice at good points, and he's really there in the room, and that dynamic is what made Injury Reserve so special. That like, there's not a lot of three-man groups like this who could three-man weave like this. Like it was so unique.
Yeah, no. I think I agree with you. I love this. I think what this album really brought home was the three-man weave. Because if it's not the yelling whoops in the production of Yo, where it goes or Groggs just coming in, and you're right, he is so low key, but he has this subtle commanding of the rhythm every time he comes in. Like you really feel like he stops the song to focus on him, but without the beat just dropping off. Like it keeps going, but it works for him. And then Richie just absolutely going wild. Like I feel like when you listen to these guys, you can see them live. I've never even seen a clip of these guys live, but you know how exactly they would be. And I think that's what's so impressive about them, is to come on the scene with a mixtape like this, and be so aware of what makes you different and special. There's a really great line. I think it's in Snowman. I should have looked this up before, but where I think it's Richie says like, "Oh, it's tough saying you rap because like everyone raps. People say my cousin raps." But these are the type of guys where if you saw them coming up, you know they're going places, because I think they just have such a grounded, wonderful little view of how they are.
Yeah, I'd say that like, almost it reminded me a tiny bit of LP. LP feels like an everyman rapper, but he's so weird and dystopian that it's almost he's a bit too artsy and elevated. You can't feel like he's just a guy in the room. He's so grand on that album, you know?
Yeah.
Richie Rati truly and Groggs truly feel like everyman rappers, where like they made a point in an interview. They said that we try not to lie in any verse. We want the most honest bragging possible. And yeah, lines like cooped up in the dentist's office flowing from the tenants. Like this whole album was made in the dentist office of the grandfather of Parker Corey.
No way.
So yes, and it's just and rapping about working at Foot Locker, like you said, everybody raps. It's so embarrassing to tell people you rap. Like it's so, but it never comes off as like nerd rap or dorky. Like it's so grounded and relatable. I'm not a rapper, but yeah, I adore that aspect of lyricism on this album. It sets them apart.
They open one of the opening lines of the album is because these raps haven't done shit but buy me a couple socks. Like I feel like these guys are so hyper aware of what a debut mixtape could be like.
Yeah, without being too self-deprecating. Like they're still very bragging. Like that the diss of calling people snowmen with their chains and like you're all temporary.
Yeah.
Get your bling, but we're making art here. Like
yeah.
I love how sort of pretentious and hipstery Richie is on this album. So Stepa, like
it really reminds me of early Kanye, where it's not completely bogged down in being nerdy, but it's definitely self-deprecating. Like all falls down. But at the same time, they're so confident in the shit that they're making. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't feel like you can have beats this chill, but also energizing. Like Snowman. Those like they're just like casual scatting over the sort of on and off bass of that beat is so like kind of. It just feels like people hanging out, but you know they know what they're doing. Like these are guys who sound like they've been doing this for decades, but it's their first fucking full length shit. It's awesome.
I mean the comparison to Kanye is so apt because I really feel like this is kind of a descendant of early Kanye on subtle levels with the part where in Everybody Knows where Groggs is like, Groggs, I love your verse, man. No shit. That's such a Kanye line.
Yeah.
It's so goofy and egotistical in a way that's really charming. To Wow, which is a rendition of the song that Kanye teases, if you remember, at the end of Last Call in College Dropout. Remember when he's like, oh, I was going to put out a song called Wow, 25,000. You go in 2,500, wow. I might keep that hook. No one steal it. That's what Kanye says. And here, Idris have stolen it and made it a song. So, really, yeah, I mean, really cool to think of as kind of a descendant of Kanye.
I think where this comes from, like, you can see all of this self-awareness coming from where they're from. Like, in the song Washed Up, they're just talking about, like, this is a real somber note in the album for a whole song. Because the hook is just Richie basically lamenting about how everyone in his town kind of has gone nowhere with his lives. Obviously, there's a variety of socioeconomic problems that probably got people in this point. But I think when you're from a place like that, it's incredibly anxiety-inducing to look around and just be like, what if I end up this way? You know?
Yeah, the thesis statement here really is. Niggas from Arizona tend to, in Richie's opinion, like, kind of have less motivation. You're in such a circumstance of, you're just completely forgotten, like, like, and how demotivating that is and how frustrating that must be. And how impossible it must feel to break out in a scene like that.
Yeah, 100%. And, see, the thing, talking about all this stuff just ends up becoming really sad because they did break out of that. They were like, they were. Oh
man, they have a song. The final, almost like all of their final tracks are like I said before, there is an indie reserve formula, and this is kind of. It's not fully formed here, but it's partially here. But the final track is always like some jazzy celebratory track of hey, we did it! Like the Floss final track, Look Mama, I did it. Self-titled Free Men Weaving. Drive Like It's Still an EP, which is very underrated. And yeah, so this very humble beginning, but obviously like geniuses from the get go, but just with no money. It is heartbreaking that they'll cut down so early.
Yeah, I know we're not completely lamenting here, but just in 45,
Oh,
I think, yeah, with what's really heartbreaking about Groggs, is that from this album to, like you mentioned this in the introduction, from this album to the self-titled, all he is talking about is just trying to make himself a better person for his kids. Like he is an independent person. You get the sense that he has a strong sense of self that he wants to make better, but a lot of the time he is just grounded in his love and desire to be a better man for his children. In the song 45, he begins saying like, my youngest son's going 4 on 5, thinking to himself, God, how time flies. And it leads him into this spiral of remembering his younger days of just like being kind of bummy and like doing anything to get your hands on some weed. But what he's doing here is just trying to essentially trying to then contrast that with how he wants to raise his children. All he's talking about across this album is just he just wants his kids to have better. And it's so sad.
Verse 2 on 45, Groggs, one of his best verses, is very much like a case study of what made Injury Reserve so special, where they did feel like they had the accessibility and pop genius of someone like Kanye with the kind of impressively conceptual raps that you could find in someone like LP. LP in his Despot Last Huzzah verse, one of the best hip hop verses ever recorded, counts up from 1 to 9 through rap, and it's incredible. However, there isn't really that sense of like emotional resonance from LP. It's all very technical and slick. Whereas like Groggs here does a whole verse where he plays with the number 45 and like resituates it in ways that's so technical and formally interesting, while also, like you said, being very accessibly emotional and palpable. And like you don't have to sit down and break down the rhyming scheme to get that really impactful just theme of him wanting to be a better person. And he jokes about it, you know, I'm damn near 30 fighting demons like I'm Constantine, but there is this real, these are some of the best alcoholic raps out there.
Yeah.
So heartfelt and empathetic, and a very odd topic to see a rapper latch on so confidently to.
Yeah. And I think it's these like the combination of these incredibly intricate and complex verses executed so casually in tandem with Parker's beats that just completes this beautiful package that Injury Reserve did better than anyone else. Truthfully, like I can't name another group like this working right now who brought what they brought to the table, because I just think Parker's production it is so there's not inspirations from JPEG Mafia here because they're sort of getting around at the same time, but they have their similarities in spaz rap, but there's so much personality there, and I think they create their own persona here. Like Injury Reserve is much one person as it is a trio.
Have you heard the song "Oh Shit" by Injury Reserve?
No.
You just accidentally referenced it.
Whoa!
Richie opens that song with "This ain't jazz rap, this that spaz rap."
Oh, that's awesome.
That's crazy that you anyway. Yeah, no, I'm happy that you bring attention to Parker because I do feel like he's like really underrated. And no one talks about him, I feel like. But I feel like out of everyone in the group, Parker really showed so much growth. And like by the time he's producing shit like Jailbreak the Tesla, it's so insane how he's astronomically above most producers in hip hop right now. And God, it's just so crazy how much talent is condensed in this one group. It doesn't make any sense. Like these guys had like a few hundred to maybe $1,000 cooped up in a dentist's office, and they made like one of the best rap albums of the decade. Like it just doesn't make any sense. I don't. There's so much raw talent here and like passion.
Yeah.
And joy.
To compare and contrast this to like to the self-titled, I think what stood out to me was I think this album is more structurally interesting on the production side. I think and just satisfying as a whole. Like there's less insane standout moments like Jailbreak the Tesla, Rap Song Tutorial, which I fucking adore.
But at the same time, there's no New Hawaii. You know,
exactly. yeah. Or even there's loads. This album, what really took me by surprise is it's pretty chill, but these chill tracks keep you just as entrenched as entranced just as much as something like Jailbreak the Tesla, because they're hypnotic, they're seductive. You're invited in by this trio. What's so great about the fact that this is a group project is you really feel like you're getting to hang out with these people, and so they take you on these rides. Like in Friday, when the beat switch comes in, it's so effective because you feel like you're being told a story by these people, and when it turns around on you, it's surprising. You feel like, you know, you're being read a bedtime story by a parent and they've suddenly introduced a new monster. It's awesome.
Yeah, and like you were saying, with how it really feels like you're in the room, guys, there's the texture of this album is really great. There's a real diegetic feel. Everything feels quite spontaneous and like live. Like a lot of the choruses, like Snowman and 45, feel like almost like crowd chants. Like you feel like it's very much like they put a microphone in the middle of the room, sang. It's a real.
It feels like the beats and the raps are being made at the same time.
Yeah, and I think, and yeah, I love the moments of like Parker putting in kind of diegetic stuff, like Richie getting into the car on various points of the album, going to places. There's a real and it is still quite lo-fi, quite cheaply produced, but with that they accomplished something so cinematic and organic that you won't get in like a Rick Ross album. You know, it's very it's the charm of independent art, right?
Yeah, and also independent art that has admirable aspirations as well. You know from the very beginning that these guys want to be more and to have more, but it's presented also earnestly and with so much context that you're just completely on the ride for them, and most of all, you want better things for them. Like it's just a lovely journey. I love this.
With that, let's move on to our least favorite tracks, and our favorite tracks and our least favorite tracks, and our overall recommendation. So I'll start. Disclaimer: I like every track on this album a lot. So I've kind of picked the ones that like I found that I go back to the most, like when I'm in my feelings, and some really great hit songs like Yo, Whatever Dude. I played the shit out of them when I was 15. And they're not on my list, but like just know that I've played the shit out of this album. Like anyway,
You've rinsed it.
Yeah, I've rinsed it. So I'll start with Friday as one of my favorite tracks. An epic two-parter track, which is like still to this day one of the most astonishing pieces they've ever put out. I used to love bumping this on the London streets with my teen friends on Friday nights and sing that chorus with my friends, which again, such a great crowd vocal pleasing moment. I adore the melancholic trumpet in the first half. It's so bouncy and relaxing. Richie sounds incredible on this. His vocals are mixed quite quietly and roughly. Before I said this stuff of him getting into the car, which is very like weirdly theatrical and ambitious for such a low budget album. And I think thematically this is one of the most honest songs about partying I've ever heard.
Yeah.
When that piano comes crashing in the middle, and you hear the people chattering along this kind of mundane ambience, like we've all felt this way at a party, right? Where it's 3 a.m. and everything's just become desperate and like weirdly emotional. Like someone always has to have a breakdown at 3 a.m., right? And like parties always end this way. Like no one just goes home.
Yeah.
And so just how sobering and affecting Groggs verses at the end of this really brings that home. So one of my favorite lines Groggs delivers here is, "I'm too old for these parties, and the bar scene's played out. Halfway through the night, I start to wonder why I stay out." Like it's so depressing,
Yeah.
and also imbuing kind of what would normally be braggy lines into something that's just quite sad. Is like the only thing open this late are legs in hospitals. As hard as I go, I'll probably end up in one of those, which is like such a poetic and sad uh
Yeah,
brag
he's
that would
not.
normally
Yeah.
be a brag, but it's presented in such a sober way, right? Ironically sober. So yeah, I just adore Friday, and it's just one of the most ambitious songs they've done. I'm also gonna put TTK TV up there. It's quite like a low-key, sober and stripped down R&B track, but I really adore this. It's kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum to Whiplash, which is a very lovable, chummy, flirtatious track that's got like roguish charm to it. This is like a heartbreaking breakup song, not too dissimilar to stuff that Kanye was doing on 808s and Heartbreaks, in my opinion. But it's still gorgeous. I love the percussion that Parker imbues into the beat. I don't know if it's cowbells or not, but the sort of syncopated the sort of syncopated metronome that clanks through is really, really compelling and addictive. And I find Richie singing just so like natural and laid back and emotional. It doesn't feel forced at all, and it doesn't feel like a forced pop. We have to sound like Drake moment. It feels very heartfelt, and it never felt like overstayed its welcome. And the kind of sort of drony, like statistical outro is moaning like, "Can you change your mind, baby?" It's just like, God, it's so sad. I'm happy this man is getting married and happy currently, because this song's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finally, my final favorite track is the song "Falling," the album closer here, which is one of my favorite album closers and my favorite Groggs verse of all time. And I just want to end this out with like reading just like some of my favorite lines Groggs spits in this, which are so heartbreaking given him not being with us anymore, but really got me through some shit. Like, the line "can't even enjoy Arizona tea in a bag of Skittles" being a reference to the death of Trayvon Martin. It's such like a God. It should be a funny, playful line, but like contextually, the Black experience is so horrifying, casually horrifying, that even just going for a bag of Skittles is like a risk, right? And this idea about him comparing himself to Denzel in Flight, like a very high functioning alcoholic. But that conclusion of like, I feel like I'm gonna crash. I have no self-role and I'm a raging alcoholic, and I'm horrified of myself, and I just want my kids to be okay. I don't want to get killed by cops. But just that like meditative conclusion of like, shit, I know I'll be all right. It's so it's just really really moving for me, and I really love this song. My least favorite track is Snowman, which is a really cool song. I really enjoy it. However, I don't know who Glass Popcorn is. Apparently, he's like a big deal in Arizona. I get the vibe that he's like an Oliver Tree type, like some sort of meme. But I don't really understand the Glass Popcorn thing, so I feel left out, and that hurt my feelings.
Therefore, bad song.
Therefore, it's my least favorite track. Overall, I think it's a strong recommend. Obviously, I adore this album, and I hope you've already heard it. But if you haven't, please check it out. If you're an Injuries F fan, go back and listen to this. This is phenomenal and seminal, and some of the most interesting, vibrant, lovable things to come out of underground rap. So I really love this. How about you, Matthew?
Okay, so I'm gonna start off with Friday, and I'm genuinely not gonna say anything about it because Josh, you explained it so beautifully. There is literally nothing I can add to that. Second is Yo. I was fucked up for a while deciding between Yo and Everybody Knows, but I'm going with Yo because hearing this song as the opener to their very first mixtape or album, whatever you want to call it, I knew these guys were truly, truly special. I haven't heard Yo for a few months, many months now, so the memory of it had faded. But once I heard it again, I just respected where these people were coming from so much, and it almost felt like a bookend to how these guys are. Now that I've heard their last and their first project, hearing them start off the way they finished is oddly beautiful, because this is a soaring, joyous celebration of all of their flaws and faults, and perfectly summed up by a one-syllable track name of just Yo. Terry, what's that?
Stepa Groggs' first line ever that I heard in interviews, being on Yo, fuck these niggas and their lame brands, all I rock is Vans shit and TVTs. It's like, oh, it's such a good brag.
It's so cute.
Like weird hipster skater kid brag.
Yeah, exactly. And I really feel like on this song, the soaring sort of jazz melodies in combination with these chanting ahs are just basically bullying you into loving this song. I think when you hear these, there is no choice but to be infected with the melody of it. And at the same time, you have Richie and Stepa just unapologetically spitting over this. They do not slow down for anyone. I brought up before how Groggs just commands things in such a subtle, powerful way. Also, he's like, to use the three-man weave metaphor themselves, he's like a basketball player just effortlessly dribbling along at his own pace. I adore this song because it reminded me of just how confident these guys have always been in their talent, and I love that about them. Last up, for favorite songs is Snowman. Snowman for me was a really nice moment of appreciating the different strengths of this album in comparison to the self-titled. I was kind of worried that this album would be sort of proto Injury Reserve and we wouldn't get anything particularly unique. But what I'm most happy with this album is its distinct identity. And Snowman, I just really like how authentic and natural and spontaneous it all feels. It really feels like a moment where, I said this before, where they just threw on whatever happened, and what we got was this really soothing, almost samba rhythmic track as they scat along to it. There's also a wonderful transition into Wow at the end of this song that I think works beautifully for the pacing of this album. This is I keep using album, and it's because mixtape doesn't mean anything with these guys, but I really appreciate the sort of psychological element of this being a mixtape, or cultural element as well. Least favorite song, I'm like Josh, I like every song on this album. It was just Whiplash. I think this is more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? A grower for me. But on these first few listens, I found it kind of an sort of limbo for me between Washed Up and Everybody Knows, as it falls in between those tracks. Everybody Knows is such an aggressive, hard-hitting song, and Washed Up being so somber. I feel like Whiplash does bridge that gap fairly well, but at the same time, I feel like in between those, it gets kind of lost. So it just didn't particularly stand out to me, but with time.
In defense of Whiplash, I love Groggs. I love Whiplash. I love Groggs' line. I'm the type of dude that will open up the car door. Mama raised a gentleman, yeah, that's for certain. I'm lying, I do it because my driving side ain't working. Such a funny tangent.
And so, yeah, I would give this a strong recommend, of course. Not just because of the sentimental aspects of this album for me. This is something special, and the only way that's reflected my opinion of them as a group is how tragic it is that they've passed away, and that a member of them has passed away, and we don't know what the future holds for Injury Reserve. But we knew if you were listening to this album at the time, you knew that they were going to do something special. And I know I said before that they didn't really get to have their true time after their self-titled, but they had enough time to show us that they had a lot going on for them and that they deserved some attention. So I'm really, really pleased that I got to hear this, even if it is a few years too late. I'd 100% recommend this.
Cool. Okay. I'm just gonna say, linked below there should be a GoFundMe for Groggs family. So I've put that in the link below. Please donate like a $5 or so. Like I don't know. No one deserves to lose their dad at such a young age, and you know they're not a rich family. So anyway, please donate. And yeah, what we doing next week?
So next week we're going to be going back to Spanish cinema with a review of Almodovar's punky 1989 film Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down. I recently saw that Josh wasn't a huge fan of Pain and Glory on Letterboxd, and so yeah, I wanted to get a sense of get a sense of how Almodovar and Banderas vibed in their heyday of the 80s. So hopefully it should just be a pulpy, fun ride.
Yeah, so sweet. We'll see you next week and tie you up, tie you down. And yeah, see you. R.I.P. Groggs.
Yeah, rest in peace, Groggs.